Hey screen printers, this instructional video is going to show you how to set up and use your new Solid-Loc screen stretching system. Now most of you are going to start out with a kit. The kits come with the stretching system, a set of frames which include the first set of tension bars like you see here, as well as a set of mesh panels. First step in the setup process is going to be reading your instructions. I know you all love to read instructions so much, but you can also watch this video, but I would still recommend reading those instructions before you get started. Tools you're going to need is a screwdriver, a drill bit, 9/16 wrench, and a table or flat surface. Now, the cool thing is the Ryonet Silver Press screen cart, or a screen cart, is perfect for one of these stretching systems. As you can see here, I'm using one of these carts right now, and it fits perfect to size. Let's get up to the setup and adjustment of your screen stretching system. The instructions for setting up your stretching system is actually easy. They're detailed in the instructional sheet here, but a couple things that I wanted to point out. The height of your tension bar or your stretching bar down to the table is very important. And for this height, we're going to go with 1 inch and 3/4. So I'm using a ruler. Obviously, you can also use right there. So 1 inch and 3/4, right about perfect. Now, you will notice that these will actually come very close possibly to the actual measurement, but you still want to take the time to actually go out here and measure it. If you have any questions following the instructions, once again, it's very clear. Things you'll need: 7/16 drill bit. You're going to need to measure from the edge or the back of the table. So from the stretching bar to the back of the table, that measurement is 13.5 inches. And then properly place your drill bits. Once again, the Ryonet screen cart works perfectly to set one of these systems up. If you take some screws and drill them to the edge of your table here, it makes for a perfect holder for your stretching bar, which saves you a lot of time versus picking up it off the floor. The first thing that I like to do when stretching a frame is make sure I have all my components. Obviously, mesh right here, your mesh panel. Then you have your tension bars on the outside of the frame and the frame itself. When applying the tension bars, ensure that you're applying them correctly. If you apply them backwards, there will be nothing to hook into. So these hooks on the bottom that you see here have to hook in to the counter hooks on the tension bar. You have 2 short sides and then 2 long sides. Now, on the screen, you're going to see some score marks. Those score marks are going to tell you where to center out the center tension bar or the long tension bar. You actually stretch these first in the stretching process, so we only need to worry about centering this one bar. The short length bars will automatically center themselves. So the first thing I'm doing, as you see, is I'm going around and I'm applying all my tension bars onto the frame, just so I'm ready to go there. Next, I'm going to place my mesh panel in. Now, there's an upside down and a right side way to actually put your mesh panels in. So the right side way is easy to tell because it allows you, when it's right side up, you can actually read the numbers. So I can read that these numbers are not upside down. When the numbers are upside down, like this, then you know the frame's backwards. So obviously, it will also not click in. So the way this guy works is these actually just simply click in. And the way I kind of set it up for your first stretch is on the long bar, I put the first bar in all the way. So it's clipped in to the outside and locked into place. Then, on the opposite side, I take the other long bar and I apply the mesh panel into it. Now, this is a bit of a trick, and the more you do it, the more you'll get used to it. You also want to make sure to avoid any sharp objects when doing this. Sharp objects are bad. They will break and tear the mesh. So you can kind of put the frame in like that, and you'll hear it click into place. So there, it's clicked into place. Now, depending on what size of mesh and how flexible it is, sometimes you can actually manually pull this back to the first tension bar. If you can, great. If you can't, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to countersink it in to the very end hook. So if you just let it hang there, it's going to fall down. But if you sink it into place with your fingers by pushing it into place like that, it will stay there and allow you to put in the stretching strip. So right here, we see both of our sides are centered out, and my mesh is placed correctly and already clipped in to the tension bar. Next, I'm going to go ahead and bring up my stretching tool. Before I do that, I'm going to put this on the stretching wedge. So this wedge actually brings this screen up to tension against the stretching bar up there. Now I take my stretching tool and I clip it into place. Now this is something that's very easy to do, but also something that you want to make sure you do correctly. If this is not clipped into place, like clipped in like you just saw it do just there, just clipped in all the way, as you're stretching it, it can rip off. That's why we actually include 2 of these stretching mesh lengths in your kit, but you obviously don't want to break it if it's not necessarily needed. So you want to make sure that you can even press down as you first get started, make sure that stretching strip's all the way in. So then you simply just pull the lever back, and that brings it to tension. And you'll hear it clip into place. As you're starting out and getting used to the system, I do recommend kind of looking over and seeing that the hooks are in their proper zone. Also, you want to make sure that you're still in alignment on both sides. If you're not in alignment, you're going to have to release the mesh strip and then start again. So how you release the mesh strip is actually you take the leverage tool out, and then you essentially stretch the screen again. But without that tool there, it allows you to release the strip. That's exactly how you unstretch a frame as well. That's how you can recenter your alignment. Once our alignment's confirmed, we simply bring it back until we hear it clip into place. Now, you can see here, if you don't hear it click all the way, you do want to double check and make sure that those hooks are all the way in place like you see there. If they're out like that and you let go, this is going to fall apart. So they need to be pressed down. Sometimes you can even take your hand and press them down a little bit if you're not seeing them clip into place. Depends on your leverage. You might want to reset your table up if that's happening a lot. But right now I can ensure they're clipped in and all good all the way around. Next, it's time to stretch the short side of the frame. So to do that, I first apply the mesh to the tension bar on the long side, the side that's away from me. And this is kind of one little trick that I've learned, is it's pretty cool. You can actually dip this guy in and hook the bar like that, or hook the tension strip like that. And then once again, this will automatically center itself out, and I typically take my fingers and just push it to the first tension lock point. Then over here, do the same thing, just kind of grab the bar like that. And a lot of times you just get it clipped right into place like that. As you get better, it gets a little bit faster. You make sure it clips in all the way. Now, it's going to be pretty hard for you to do this on this side. So what I would recommend doing again is setting it by pressing it against the first lock point or the first hook, and then coming over here, putting in the leverage bar. And then if you pull over the tension tool like this, it makes it a lot easier to insert the strip. And you can see the strip lock into place. Make sure to press it down all the way to ensure that it locks into place. Now, while the strip's like this and the tension bar's like this, you do have some movement to move the tension bar back and forth, just in case you need to realign that. You also want to make sure there's no mesh stuck in the corners here. So once we're all good to go, we simply bring this to its first tension and second tension point. And once again, we're looking for that clip so it locks into place. So if it doesn't lock into place all the way, we can press it down a little bit, make sure that it locks into place, and then we're good to go. After that, we simply take out the leverage bar, turn the frame around, and we will do the last side, and then we'll actually be done with the stretching process. So push the bar over, we put that all the way in like that, and then just bring that up to tension. Now that one definitely clipped into place, we can hear it, so we're good to go, and that is done. Now as you're doing this for the first time, you're going to be pulling a lot, and you're going to feel like you're putting a lot of pressure into this. As long as everything's clipped into place and you hear it lock, that's why we call it the solid lock system, as long as that's happening, then you're okay. If one of your mesh strips is not hooked in all the way, or your stretching strip is not hooked in all the way, it's going to rip and fall out as you're stretching it. You also don't want to press or pound on any of these surfaces because this frame's really high tension right now. We'll measure it, but this could be upwards of 40 newtons in tension. So if you're pounding or pressing on it, you want to be very gentle. So if you ever have to press anything or move anything, you want to make sure that you're not putting too much anti-force on this stretching system because it will likely rip and tear out either your mesh strip or break your mesh panel. And you know you're probably going to break a few panels along the way, but that's a part of the learning process. I've broken only one, and I've stretched probably about 50 of these so far. Let's actually measure the tension on this guy. So we'll put our Ryonet tension meter down, and this stretches all the way up to 36 newtons. Then we'll go the other side. And then 36, 37 newtons. Very, very high tension. Obviously, we're going to lose a little tension along the way. One of the cool things about this system is we can actually use those second set of tension bars on one long and one short side. Now, the way you tell the second set of tension bars is they're green. So it's very easy to tell which screens have the second set of tension bars and which ones don't. But these second set of tension bars actually put the mesh clips further back, so you're creating more tension on the frame. But even with the first set, we find you get a lot of use, a lot longer use, in fact, out of this frame than you would a static frame, or even a Newman roller frame, because these panels are strategically cut to a specific geometry in order to create and hold high tension. If you notice, the corners are fairly tight right here. You don't have a lot of give like you would in a Newman roller frame, and these are tight all the way to the edge. So you actually get a bigger printable surface out of one of these frames than you would a static frame or a Newman roller frame. So it does hold tension a lot longer than a normal frame, but if you ever want to get it tighter, you can always use that second set of tension bars. Now let's cover unstretching or replacing panels in the Solid-Loc frame. So basically, if you're going to replace your panel, you want to make sure to reclaim your screen. You don't want to replace panels that have emulsion on them if possible. You know, you could possibly do this with maybe a simple one-color job and then re-stretch that emulsified screen with the image on it later, but we definitely would recommend just reclaiming all the screen, dehazing, degreasing, doing everything that you normally do before you dismantle the frame. So it's actually pretty easy to do. What we're going to do is, instead of actually using the shim, we're going to take the shim bar out, and then we're simply just going to go through the stretching process again. So without the shim bar, we start one side, and basically this goes really fast. Lock the frame in to place. Make sure that's all locked down. Remember, I always press that. And then, without the shim there, you're allowed to basically pull the screen over. Now, sometimes, depending on where you're at, the screen wants to release and sometimes it doesn't want to release. So there we go. We got to let that work out a little bit, and then it releases fine. So once again, no super harsh movements, because if you're moving too hard, a lot of times what will happen is you could risk ripping that mesh. But if you keep your movements very soft and precise, we're going to be much better off. So we do the same exact thing to the opposite side. Once the tension's off the mesh, it's much easier. And just kind of let it jig free like that. And we're going to flip the frame and just do that one more time. Make sure that's clipped in all the way. And there we are. That is now done. The last bar simply removes like so. And then we can replace this with another mesh size, save this. Now, when storing these panels, you want to make sure that you store them flat. You don't want to crinkle them up. Store them nice and flat without a lot of pressure on them. If you're stacking more than, let's say, 10 panels at once, you want to put something to support the panel so that you don't have a lot of mesh, because obviously the panel strips, the edges, will actually build up. So you want to put like some type of paper in here or something to support the mesh so that it doesn't have a lot of weight on it. So just stack them flat, and then just keep them. Make sure not to keep them around sharp objects, all that good stuff. And they should last for a very long time. Now, you can stretch and re-stretch these things many times. It's just making sure to keep them in good condition if you're not going to be using them. Let's show you how to use the second set of tension bars, color green, that's how you tether the second set, with the Solid-Loc frame system. Now, in order to use the second set of tension bars, you want to make sure that you first need it. So you definitely need to have a tension meter if you're ever going to use these things. You don't want to second tension a tight mesh panel. There's no need to, and you could actually break that mesh. So you want to make sure that your mesh is relaxed down to about 19 or 20 newtons versus the 30 to 35 newtons that you stretch the mesh at. Once the mesh is relaxed, then you can go ahead and use these bars. They're very, very simple to use. Instead of using all of the standard tension bars, which are your standard aluminum ones, we're simply going to use 2 standard ones, and we're also going to use 2 of the second tension ones. And then everything else that we're going to be doing from then on out is the same. So it's pretty easy from there on out. Once your screen is stretched, the screen is actually stretched and emulsified already, it's very important to remember these frames are much higher tension than your normal static frames. So you do need to handle them with care. You don't want to just throw them around the shop like you might be used to with your normal static frames. Your static frames are about 33% less tension on average than one of these Solid-Loc frames. So it's very important to handle them with care. And when I mean handling them with care, once again, not throwing them around, carefully handling them, and most importantly, protecting the edges of your mesh. Right here is your critical edge of the mesh, and if anything sharp, like a screen rack or even your screen printing press clamp, touches this, it could likely puncture and then rip your mesh panel, rendering this entire mesh panel probably useless. So in order to protect that, what we're going to do is you have 2 options. Option number 1 is you can use some more thicker, stronger tape, like our 2-inch or 3-inch tape from our tape. It's much thicker than your standard screen tape, and you can simply just tape along the edge like that, which will protect it. You don't want to just use the very, very thinnest tape possible. You do want to use some tape that has some body to it. So that's your first option. Second option is actually to use one of the mesh protection strips, which this is probably my preferred option. Makes it very, very easy. So these guys actually are specifically designed to clip in to your tension strip right here. You got to get it going from one end and then just press it in, and then it protects your frame all around. So like that, protects your frame, protects the mesh. Now this does give your frame a little bit of off contact as well, which is kind of cool because it kind of acts like an off contact tab. So these are easy to put in, take out, and a good accessory for the Solid-Loc frame system. Finally, when cleaning, degreasing, and dehazing these screens, be very careful not to use toxic or hazardous dehazers. Ryonet green stuff works perfectly for this, and if you use a very acidic dehazer, you can actually eat the glue away right here on these mesh strips, which is very, very bad and will cause the mesh to rip away from the strips. So you use very eco-friendly, the Enviro strip, the Enviro haze, and the Enviro degreaser, as well as Ryonet green stuff works great for this and does not have any of that alkalinity in it. That concludes our video on the Solid-Loc frame system. We hope you enjoy, and your Solid-Loc prints thousands of shirts faster, quicker, and more precise for you as a screen printer.